Welcome to Lavish Hi-Fi. My name is Stephen Lester. I'm going to attempt to do a series of informational videos that cover a range of topics, all of which are just backgrounds, because nothing is a substitute for coming in and sitting down and having a listen for yourself. The reason I do all of this is, frankly, there's nothing better than having the experience of sitting down with someone, playing some music for them, and have them hear it as if it was the first time. It's literally like watching somebody seeing color for the first time, or being able to taste, like that chocolate cake, for the very first time. It's a very emotionally charged experience because music touches each one of us individually in a way which words simply cannot describe. And that is the driving force behind literally everything I do. I have said for decades that high-end audio is a necessary evil. We need it to get to the music that we want to hear, that we want to experience, that we want to feel. And I've said that for decades, and I believe it's true today. Understanding the electronics is key to knowing how to bring a system to life in a way which suits the individual. So let's talk about some basics before we get into components and different technologies in a series of videos. I'd like to start with the word stereo. We use the word stereo very often to mean a thing that plays music. If I ask most people what a stereo is, they'll say it's two speakers. And if I ask why, understandably, it's because we have two ears. In fact, the idea of stereo sound came back at a time when 3D photography was becoming very, very popular. This is the beginning of the last century. And the idea of stereo coming from the Greek word for solid, firm, and three-dimensional. The idea of stereo sound was that the engineers wanted to place an acoustic event in front of the listener as if the musicians were playing just for them in their room. Not only to hear the music itself, but hear where it's being played, because that is a huge part of the musical experience. Not just the notes, but the notes from real instruments in a real place. And that's where the idea of stereo sound came from. It had nothing to do with two speakers. As a matter of fact, the reason that we have two speakers is because there was no way at that time to deliver more than two channels of audio. It was a simple technological limitation, because two speakers and two channels to reproduce stereo, or a three-dimensional image, true 3D, it's very, very fragile. It requires that the listener and the loudspeakers have a very particular relationship. Most people are not thinking about 3D sound when they play music. The three most common places for us to listen to music are on headphones or earbuds, in which case the music takes place in our head and shuts out the rest of the world. Similarly, in our cars, where there may be 20 speakers all around us, and we're immersed in the music, kind of like headphones, we're shutting out the rest of the world. And then in a home sound system. The reason I say home sound system and not stereo is because most home sound systems could be stereos, but they're not set up or used that way. It may be speakers in the ceiling. It may be a surround system in an adjacent room, or a speaker over there and a speaker over there. In order for it to be stereo and reproduce three-dimensional stereo sound, the listener and the loudspeakers need to be in some semblance of an equilateral triangle. Now, how precise that setup of that triangle you do will determine the reality or the realism or the belief of the listener that there really is a three-dimensional musical event happening in front of them. Poorly set up, it would be like setting up a camera that wasn't quite in focus. Precisely set up, we literally focus the loudspeakers so that they are in perfect alignment with the listener, and your brain takes over, and boom, you feel the difference when the three-dimensional experience is revealed. That three-dimensional experience is captured in most recordings, whether or not they are acoustic events or entirely electronic events. In the case of an electronic event, typically we would have a person sitting at a mixing board with a pair of loudspeakers, and they would quite literally paint an aural landscape in front of the listener. And when you play that back, it's a very different experience than you have when you listen on headphones or in your car. It's an addiction to many of us in the industry and hobbyists when as they discover each recording has all these magical elements of space and time and a very compelling connection to the musicians that are creating that sound. A common question that I get at my classes is, well, what if I don't want to sit down in an equilateral triangle and listen to music in 3D? I just want to put on some music and have it on. Well, that's fine. If we go through the steps of precisely aligning a system so that when you have the luxury of a few moments to sit down and truly connect with that musician, that system synergy works to make a better sound for everybody in the room. So that effort is not lost. As a matter of fact, it's a benefit to anyone for any application of music, whether it's for a party or just simply keeping you company. I want to talk a little bit about music and what happens between the listener and the musician. Something happens inside us at certain moments with certain pieces of music, which is simply beyond words. It is a kind of intimate, deeply personal experience. Between the musician and the listener is a whole series of obstacles, from the microphones to the microphone cables to the mixing board to the room that it was in to the preferences of the producer, and that's before the music even gets onto whatever the recorded medium is. Then, as a consumer, we pick up the disc, or we access the stream, or we tune into that radio station, and that signal comes into our playback device, which has a whole series of other obstacles. All of this getting in the way of what started off as an emotional feeling inside of the musician, intended to reach the ears and therefore the heart of the listener. One of the most common comments, if you will, that I hear lately is, we have music everywhere. We have it in every room of our house, we have it in our cars, we have it everywhere, but we don't have anywhere to listen to music. There is no system that draws us into the music, that makes us want to turn it up, and we find ourselves hitting the skip button more often than the play button. So why press play? This is the central question. We press play because we want to feel something. We've had a bad day, we need to shake the cobwebs out of our head, we want to jump up and down and scream, or we simply want to disappear for a moment within ourselves. Before we press play, we're going to have to do some homework. We're going to have to set up a system, and that system is going to be made up of components. A lot of focus online and in magazines and in general is made about individual components. It's easy to talk about them. What isn't talked about very often is how those components work together. System synergy, how the individual components play together, and how all of that plays in your room is an art form. It's not that esoteric, but it is an art form which requires understanding how each one of those components contributes to the sound and therefore conveys the emotional content of the music. When it comes to components, I like to use the analogy of a stove or a camera. A great stove will not make us better chefs, but having a great stove might inspire you to use it more, to apply more energy, to use it more creatively. The same thing is true of a camera. Go out and buy a tremendous camera. It's a wonderful thing to pick up, to touch, to hold, and it may compel you to put more effort into the outcome. The camera by itself isn't going to make you a better photographer, but in your hands, a better camera may allow you to explore your capabilities even more. And great hi-fi systems are very much the same way. When you have a tremendous piece of equipment, it will draw you towards using it the same way that camera or that incredible stove will. We sell systems and we sell individual components. But when I'm talking about individual components with you, it's always going to be in the context of the system that it's going into, how you use it, what your preferences are, your room, other components, and so on and so forth. Then, when I drill down into the details of a series of choices, it'll be up to your own individual style to choose which one. A lot of what we do in day-to-day life is dependent on access. Most of us can barely remember life before cell phones or before cable television. But if you think about it, access has determined the way you engage with media. And if you don't have a great sound system, you don't experience music at a level of intimacy that you do when you do have a system that's excellent and properly set up. So while it would be easy to say, well, I never sit down and listen to music, I assure you, if the music is so compelling that it literally makes you stop and breathe and connect, then you will use it. Even if it's for a couple of moments or minutes every month. There are quiet moments which are just yours, no one else's, where some piece of music draws you to push the play button. And those are the moments that all of this is for.